Historic keeps harboring the ghosts of founding fathers, mountain ranges where spectral troops still wander amongst the dense forests, and abandoned cemeteries where phantoms lurk await on this special 4th of July journey through some of the most haunted Revolutionary War battlefields in the United States. Are you sure you're ready to get started? Hey guys, and thanks for tuning in for this adventure across some of the most haunted battlefields in the US. When I saw that the 4th of July this year was going to land smack dab on my usual upload night, I knew I had to do something special. And in a country that's since become tragically divided, what better way to bring us all together and to honor the sacrifices made by our forefathers than to share some of our nation's most cherished and patriotic ghost stories? From blood-soaked battlegrounds where terrifying entities of the past still linger, to remote townships whose bounds are roamed by the supernatural remnants of soldiers who gave it all in the fight for their new world. What awaits on this list will shock you. Fix bayonets and let's charge right in. Our first haunt has us exploring the heartland of Massachusetts and the ever-famous Minuteman National Historical Park. The Minuteman National Historical Park, which is located in Middlesex County, Massachusetts, is a highly prestigious expanse renowned for its preservation of the site of the opening battle of the American Revolution, the very act that started this country's march towards independence, whose bounds are also widely recognized for their large assortment of associated ghost stories and claims of inexplicable phenomena. Historically, and as commonly known, through the mid-1700s, relations between the Crown and the New World had become, for lack of a better word, strained. Following the after-effects of the French and Indian War, the Proclamation of 1763, the Stamp Act of 65, the Townshend Act of 67, and the subsequent Boston Massacre of 1770 and Tea Party of 1773, America was a continent on the brink. A sense of camaraderie had formed between the colonies, and many an argument was held as to why this new government had to face orders from one they'd so desperately sought to escape. On April 19th of 1775, on Concord's North Bridge, which is encompassed by modern-day park bounds, and following a brief battle at Lexington, colonial commanders would order their militia to, for the first time ever, fire back at British troops, marking the start of our nation's journey towards true independence. Following initial gunfire, the British would dispatch American militia. However, while they searched the bridge for supplies, American forces would take up higher ground and would further exchange fire, eventually driving British forces back and resulting in their retreat to Boston. The British would then endure continued assault in the form of superior guerrilla tactics, with Americans refusing to stand in traditional fire lines in favor of attacking from behind trees, structures, walls, and additional cover, which resulted in heavy British casualties and an absolutely shattered loyalist morale. Not surprisingly, interest in preserving this expanse grew rapidly through the centuries, until, on September 21st of 1959, it was established as a National Historical Park. Today, the Minuteman Park offers a range of significant sites, including the Minuteman Statue of 1874, the Obelisk Monument, the Battle Road Trail between Lexington and Concord, the Captain William Smith House, the Hartwell Tavern, the Wayside, the Lexington Green, the Barrett's Farm, and much, much more. But it's not just history that haunts the Minuteman National Historical Park, and over its years, many who have dared traipse its grounds have reported a host of chilling occurrences, including phantom gunfire, the smells of gunpowder, blood, and tobacco smoke without source, and disembodied voices, cries, and laughter. Investigations of the expanse have yielded orbs captured in photography, EVPs caught in the backgrounds of audio and video recordings, and strange temperature fluctuations, while several investigators have told of their electronic equipment behaving erratically or outright dying even while on full batteries. Easily the park's most famous specter is that of an unknown soldier in a tricorn hat and militia garb whose silhouette appears stalwart against the horizon. While no particular names have been identified or associated with said figure, many theorize that this manifestation is a collective result of all those Americans who lost their lives in the early pursuit of freedom, and some tell that he, or it, forever watches over the land, protecting our country from those who might wish to do it harm, including parties both foreign and domestic. Our second haunt takes us to the Pennsylvania-New Jersey border to a famous location along the Delaware River that should be well known amongst most Americans. Washington Crossing Historic Park and the associated state park, which span the Delaware and cover both the Pennsylvania and New Jersey sides, is an ever-famous expanse marking the legendary turning point of the Revolution in which, while American morale was at its all-time low, founding father, first president, and at the time General George Washington led his troop of 2,400 men across the Delaware at McConkey's Ferry in order to attack a garrison of 1,500 Hessian soldiers based out of Trenton, New Jersey, that's bounds are shrouded in a host of scary stories and tales of supernatural activity. Historically, on the night of December 25th in 1776, Washington would lead his army over the current and would direct them to victory against the Hessians, ultimately resulting in a significant turning point in the war, and in renewed hope amongst the Continental Army, Congress, and the general populace. While this site would remain a legend for generations to come, in 1917 its status was officialized when it was established as a historic park, and shortly afterwards, in 1919, a commission was formed in order to preserve and modernize the expanse. Today, the Washington Crossing Historic Park plays home to a range of trails and landmarks, including to the Bowman's Tower, which it's believed is actually the point at which Washington scoped out the banks of the Delaware for signs of enemy movement. If you're on the hunt for really awesome historic places, Washington Crossing should make any prolific ghost hunters list. And over the years, those who have visited its bounds have reported a wide range of happenings, including extreme cold patches felt in adverse weather conditions, odd snippets of voices heard through car radios in the area, and instances of cell phones dying at abnormal rates. Several investigations of the expanse have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, and hits on thermal grids. And around Halloween time, ghost tours and informal investigations are offered to those who are feeling particularly brave. Amongst the surrounding forests, shadowy figures have been sighted drifting about. Some claim cult activity runs rampant, and there have been several sightings of cryptids such as Sasquatch and Dogmen, as well as of inhuman abominations lacking classifications entirely. Several ritual sites have been discovered in various areas, and those who have camped out at nearby sites have described being awakened in the middle of the night to a strange clatter, and have opened their tents only to find the area completely vacant. Easily the most famous crossing stories surround our founding father, George Washington, and tell that his ghost, along with the ghosts of his men, might still linger on site. Across the river, and especially after dark, the sounds of a large party with horses have been heard splashing around, and are often accompanied by shouted commands and the smells of food and tobacco smoke. Near both banks, phantom campfires have been sighted, and many report feeling an ominous sense of anxiety that some attribute to what Washington's party felt before crossing the current. Additionally, within the Bowman's Tower, disembodied footsteps and voices have been heard. The door has been known to lock, unlock, and open and close on its own, and bootsteps are often detected ascending the construct even when it's completely empty. Finally, on moonlit nights, a silhouette matching that of old George himself has been spied perched high atop the tower, forever considering his next move in the name of freedom. Our third haunt lands us on the northern end of South Carolina, amongst a mountainous region that held high significance through the Revolution. Kings Mountain National Military Park, which is placed out of Blacksburg, South Carolina, right along the North Carolina-South Carolina border, is a sweeping historic expanse preserving the site of a significant Revolutionary War battle, in which American forces triumphed over a large Loyalist detachment that's bounds are now shrouded in a number of ghost stories and tales of supernatural encounters. Historically, amidst the Revolutionary War and prior to 1780, a majority of associated combat was fought in the northern states. However, following an unsuccessful campaign there, British General Sir Henry Clinton would push his way into Charleston, after which he would send detachments in all directions and would place the infamous Charles Cornwallis in charge of his new southern campaign. Preceding the defeat of American Colonel Abraham Buford at the Battle of Waxhaws, colonial forces were inspired to rally a resistance, resulting in the formation of a troop called the Over Mountain Men, who swore to defend Kings Mountain. And on October 7th, this force would meet the left wing of Cornwallis's army in combat and would claim victory along with around 700 prisoners, effectively ending Loyalist advancement into the Carolinas. On March 3rd of 1931, and under an act of Congress, the Kings Mountain National Military Park was formally established and would act as a terminus to the Over Mountain Victory National Historic Trail, which marked the route our patriots traveled through the Appalachians to the battle site. Notably, this trail leads from the visitors center around the base of the mountain, up along the battle lines and to where the Loyalists were positioned, all while passing by a number of historic sites and monuments. Additionally, the whole of the military park backs right up to the Kings Mountain State Park, which offers a living history farm that's definitely worth a visit, alongside plentiful camping, hiking, and picnic areas for those with an interest in truly immersing themselves. Disturbingly, the whole of this weathered old park has long played host to stories of ghostly happenings and inexplicable activity, and those who have braved its bounds have reported extreme cold spots felt in adverse weather conditions, shadowy figures sighted slinking amongst the trees, and phantom drum beats or old-timey war music heard drifting on the winds. The spectral forms of a troop of soldiers believed to be the Over Mountain Men have been sighted from time to time. The appearance of these soldiers has often been described in a somewhat disturbing fashion, with unsuspecting witnesses telling of seeing small bits of motion in surrounding foliage that they initially usually attribute to wild animals or wind-related disturbances, but after a while, they begin catching glimpses of men in old uniforms moving slowly and silently that blend into the scenery so well they almost appear part of it, and its moss-draped forms are only visible for fleeting moments before they dissolve back into nothingness. Several informal investigations of the area have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, and anomalies on thermal grids, while other reports detail encounters with inhuman beasts such as skunk apes, skinwalkers, and wendigo. Lastly, a handful of accounts have told of ghostly gunshots, screams, and the clash of combat, and some have described coming across entire scenes of battle that they first believed to be reenactments, before the entire display fades away in the blink of an eye. And on to number 4, which has us exploring upstate New York and one of the bloodiest battlefields of the entire fight for freedom. The Saratoga National Historical Park, located in Stillwater, New York, is a massive 3,392-acre expanse memorializing a significant Revolutionary War battlefield on which, and through victory, America showed the French they were capable of wielding their own independence, and its grounds have grown in infamy due to their purported range of paranormal activity and associated local ghost stories. Historically, in 1777, the British greatly underestimated their American opponents and the combined strength of the colonies united, and in an attempt to sever connections between said colonies, British General John Burgoyne would lead a force from Canada down to the Hudson Valley, where he hoped to rally reinforcements from New York and from the West, reinforcements which ultimately and rather ironically never showed. The first confrontation of the now legendary battle would transpire on September 19th of 1777, when Burgoyne's forces clashed with American troops under the command of General Horatio Gates. And during this conflict, while the British managed to just barely hold the field, they would suffer severe casualties, and were ultimately unable to break American lines. Conversely to their opposition's situation, Gates and his Americans were joined over time by General Benedict Arnold and Colonel Daniel Morgan, and a host of militia from far and wide, who were all very well prepared for further attack. On October 7th of 1777, the second engagement of the battle would transpire in the form of the Battle of Bemis Heights, which, under the aggressive leadership of Arnold, who played a pivotal role despite grievous wounds, would end in the repelling of Burgoyne's army and in a resounding American victory. By October 17th, and under the weight of dwindling supplies and devastated morale, Burgoyne was forced to surrender his entire army, resulting in American alliances with France, Spain, and the Netherlands, and in an international recognition and support towards the American cause. Through the 19th century, interest in the preservation of this historic site would grow rapidly. In 1927, the establishment of a New York State Preserve was authorized, and in 1938, the Saratoga National Historical Park was officially established under an act of Congress, and would eventually be absorbed into the National Park System, after which it would undergo a series of modernizations and several construction projects under the Civilian Conservation Corps. More recently, in 2021, management of the exact site where Burgoyne surrendered was transferred to the National Park Service and was established as the Saratoga Surrender Site Memorial Park. Today, the park offers a range of educational activities complete with a visitor center and a 20-minute orientation film, alongside a slew of restored house museums, trails, and the Saratoga Battle Monument, which is held in the nearby village of Victory. Over its many years, the Saratoga National Historical Park has become synonymous with an array of otherworldly happenings, with both officials and visitors reporting shadowy figures that stalk the living, phantom gunshots and cannon fire heard in the distance, and campfires sighted through the trees that always seem to disappear when approached. Several informal investigations of the field have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, and odd hits on communicative devices such as Ouija boards and spirit boxes, while others have sworn their personal effects have gone missing only to turn up later in odd places. Easily, some of Saratoga's most infamous hauntings are reports of encounters with the full-bodied apparitions of soldiers and civilians from Revolutionary War times. Amongst the most frequently cited apparitions, one of the site's most common specters is that of an African-American man in a tricorn hat and American garb. Sadly, one prominent report details a woman who actually spoke with this entity for a time, during which he told her that he was pretty sure he was killed by friendly fire before he promptly faded into nothingness. Last but not least, our fifth and final haunt has us exploring the very place where the war ended, being the Yorktown Battlefield in Williamsburg, Virginia. The Yorktown Battlefield, which is located out of Williamsburg, Virginia, is a wildly famous historic area commemorating possibly the most famous battle of the American Revolution, that's bounds are tied to a number of old hill legends and tales of otherworldly happenings. Historically, at the height of the Revolutionary War, on September 28th of 1781, the Continental Army under General George Washington himself, and joined by the French Army under General Comte de Rochambeau, would engage in an epic battle with Loyalist forces under General Lord Charles Cornwallis. Incidentally, this Battle of the Titans would mark the last major confrontation of the Revolution in North America, and its conclusion would yield in events that resulted in the forming of our very nation. Preceding the fight, Washington and Rochambeau would march their forces from New York to Virginia, while the French fleet, under Admiral de Grasse, would form a naval blockade in the Chesapeake Bay in order to prevent an early British retreat and the transport of reinforcements. On the 28th, Washington and his men would meet Cornwallis in battle in Yorktown, where Continental forces would lay siege to a Loyalist army that was already dug in and fortified. After 3 weeks of brutal combat and the capturing of key British defenses, being redoubts 9 and 10, Cornwallis was forced to surrender on October 19th, effectively ending the revolution, and leading to the British government's desire to negotiate, which ultimately resulted in the Treaty of Paris in 1783, and in America's independence. Through the late 19th century, interest in preserving the Yorktown Battlefield would grow, with local historical societies recognizing the need for a monument. On July 3rd of 1930, establishment of the Colonial National Monument was authorized, and on December 30th of the same year, the park was officiated. On August 10th of 1933, the Yorktown Cemetery was transferred from the War Department to the National Park Service, and on June 5th of 1936, the whole of the expanse was redesignated as a National Historical Park. In the present, the Yorktown Battlefield remains a popular historic attraction and welcomes over 3 million visitors annually, offering a mess of trails, reenactments, and educational opportunities. Not all that surprisingly, the whole of this aged battlefield site has long played host to a range of chilling hauntings and tales of encounters with the unknown, and those who have tread its bounds have reported instances of objects or personal possessions sighted moving or going missing, run-ins with ghostly figures, many of which that are clad in clothing or uniforms from the Revolutionary era, and the constant feelings of being watched or being followed by someone or something unseen. Within the Thomas Nelson House, which is where Cornwallis took refuge with a handful of his troops for a time, before Thomas himself ordered the bombardment of his own home. Both staff and visitors have reported encounters with the spirits of British soldiers, many of whom manifest as bloodied and broken. Doors have been known to open and close on their own, and the entity of a man bearing an uncanny resemblance to Cornwallis himself has been observed lurking about, always sulking. Another haunted hotspot is the Moore House, in which, on October 19th of 1781, the British admitted defeat and signed a treaty to end the conflict. A week prior, however, on October 13th, tragedy befell the residence when one John Turner was mortally wounded on the field and rushed to the Moore House where his wife Clara attempted to treat his injuries. Sadly, it's told that Turner died in his wife's arms, and the spirits of both the soldier and his beloved have been spied roaming the grounds, though never together and always at different times of the day. The Diggs house, which acted as home to Dudley Diggs and to his wife Martha, has long been tied to a story related to the death of the aforementioned. Tragically, Martha would pass on during childbirth, and though Dudley would eventually remarry and would go on to have 9 children with his new wife, Elizabeth, whenever times were hard, he would still pray to Martha for answers, all the way up until his own passing in 1790. Disturbingly, it's believed Martha's presence remains within their home, and in 1960, during a renovation, workers rushed to her former room after hearing a blood-curdling scream, where they all witnessed the ghost of a woman floating above the bed in a bloody nightgown. To date, many have reported encounters with the Phantom of Martha, who always manifests in bloodied clothing, and several have even told of being chased from the property in fear. Finally, across Surrender Field, visitors have reported hearing ghostly music floating on the winds despite an absence of musicians, while others have told of the smells of blood and the sounds of cannon fire that emanate from thin air, and a ghostly man that many believe belongs to Jackie Curtis, the stepson of George Washington, who in life always tried to earn his stepfather's approval, but who ultimately ended up failing at pretty much everything and dying of illness at only 28, has been viewed running desperately across the field, begging for guidance, and seemingly searching for someone or something briefly before fading away. Thanks everyone for joining me on this list of some of the most haunted battlefields in the US. If you enjoyed hearing my histories and ghost stories, subscribe to my channel, throw this upload a like, and share me with anyone you feel could use a good scare. Oh, and while I usually stray away from politics, on our country's Day of Independence, let's try to keep things safe, fun, and attempt to remember where we all came from so we might come together with those we don't necessarily agree with on a daily basis, in the better interest of rebuilding a nation divided by media and politics controlled solely by men with the largest bankrolls. Happy 4th of July, everyone. I'll see you next time.